For $7 billion, Nokia sold the one thing the world knew it for, its phones. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a deliberate amputation of its own identity. To the public, it looked like the final, embarrassing surrender of a fallen king. The brand that once sold 281 million handsets a year was now a hollowed-out collection of network patents and infrastructure, a ghost of its former self. But inside the company, this wasn't an admission of defeat. It was a brutal, calculated first step in a radical survival strategy. To become an AI infrastructure powerhouse with a stock price hitting its highest point since 2008, Nokia first had to be willing to cut off its most famous limb. This is the story of the cut. The transaction closed at $7.2 billion. With that check, Microsoft acquired Nokia's mobile phone division, and Nokia the brand vanished from living rooms and pockets worldwide. This was corporate triage. The company's consumer heart. The division that made it a global icon was sold off to stop a fatal financial bleed. What remained was a skeleton, network infrastructure gear, a mapping service called HERE, and a vault of patents. The world's most recognizable phone maker had traded its face for cash. Inside, the company felt hollow. Haunted by a legacy it had just sold, the market's verdict was brutal. Without a consumer product, Nokia was now solely at the mercy of telecom operators, lumpy, cyclical budgets. It was a rudderless ship in a stormy sea. Analysts saw a company stripped of its identity, a collection of assets searching for a new engine of growth. Leadership had successfully cauterized the wound. But in doing so, they had removed the company's heart. The patient was stable. But could it ever learn to walk again, let alone run? Stopping the bleeding is one thing. Building a new circulatory system is another. And that required a brash, debt-fueled bet on arrival. A gamble that doubled down on the very complexity Nokia was desperately trying to escape. 2 years after sawing off its own consumer arm, Nokia made a move that looked like strategic madness, a $16.6 billion fever dream. In 2015, it announced an all-share acquisition of its Franco-American rival, Alcatel-Lucent. To analysts, this was a debt-fueled marriage of two struggling telecom equipment players, doubling down on a low-margin, high-complexity sector. It appeared to be a desperate play for scale, a bet that two sinking ships tied together might somehow float. But this was not a merger of equals. It was a corporate raid disguised as a handshake. The prize wasn't Alcatel-Lucent's market share. It was the targeted extraction of its crown jewels, the legendary Bell Labs research division, and its untouchable dominance in IP routing and optical networking. Nokia wasn't buying a company. It was buying the core architecture of the internet itself. The strategy was now brutally clear. Swap a dying consumer identity for an unrivaled, full-spectrum network franchise. To own the pipes. The immediate result was chaos. Integrating two sprawling, culturally distinct organizations created immense operational friction and masked the deal's true purpose. Wall Street saw only integration risk and balance sheet strain. The standard synergy announcements filled the air. What was invisible to the market was the construction of a new foundation. By acquiring Alcatel-Lucent's portfolio, including its critical submarine network capabilities, Nokia was positioning itself to touch every byte of global internet traffic from the undersea cable to the local cell tower. With the Alcatel engine bolted on, Nokia now owned the pipes. But the internet's geography was shifting from telecom towers to cavernous data centers. The map of the digital world was being redrawn. The pivot wasn't complete. It was about to be stress-tested by a surge of AI demand that no one, not even the architects of this deal, saw coming. The Alcatel integration was the engine swap. This was the next move. Strip the vehicle down to its racing weight. Nokia divested its HERE mapping division. A valuable asset, but not the asset that mattered. You don't win a war on two fronts. This wasn't a fire sale. It was a calculated redeployment of capital, and critically, of engineering talent, pulled away from consumer-facing technology and funneled toward a single, defining objective. Nokia was shedding every old skin. Former phone company, former mapping company, former conglomerate. Each identity burned as fuel. The full force of the organization was now concentrated on one battle: owning the physical infrastructure of the next-generation internet. The new focal point was the Optical Networks division, the crown jewel buried inside the Alcatel acquisition. And this was the deeper, more consequential pivot. Capital was channeled into high-speed fiber optic gear, designed not for traditional telecom carriers, but for the hyperscale data centers powering the AI boom. While the market remained fixated on 5G radio contracts, Nokia was quietly wiring the physical backbone of the cloud. The plan projected a combined growth trajectory for its optical and IP networks of 18% to 20%, a range that would prove conservative. The mission had shifted from connecting people to connecting machines at the speed of light. This deep, unglamorous work of rewiring its own purpose went largely unnoticed. Years of quiet construction inside a structure most investors still called a phone company. Nokia was building an invisible empire at the foundation of the cloud. The market had completely mispriced what was happening underneath the surface. But a structure this powerful cannot stay hidden forever. And when the demand signal finally hit, it wouldn't come from telecom carriers. It would come from a force no one at the time had priced in. The validation arrived not as a press release, but as an earnings report that registered like a shockwave through every trading floor in Europe. First quarter of 2026, operating profit surged 54%. The engine behind it was unmistakable. A 49% year-over-year leap in sales to AI and cloud customers, underpinned by nearly $1.16 billion in new orders for optical networking gear. The quiet, deep work was now producing financial force the market could not rationalize away. For the first time in a generation, Nokia's numbers told a single, unambiguous story: growth, built on a strategy the street had long dismissed as a sideshow. The repricing was violent and swift. A 140% stock surge ignited, lifting Nokia's market capitalization toward $91.9 billion. Shares hit highs not seen since 2008. An 18-year drought ending in months. Analyst language shifted almost overnight. Reports stopped referencing a beleaguered 5G vendor and began modeling Nokia as a top-tier AI infrastructure pick. Morgan Stanley and CFRA both upgraded the stock to top picks within the same week. 5 major firms re-rating in unison, a signal loud enough to rewire entire portfolios. This wasn't speculative froth. This was a fundamental re-rating driven by tangible, urgent demand for high-speed optical equipment inside the world's most advanced data centers. The company once left for dead was now the physical backbone of the artificial intelligence boom. And the competitive picture told its own story. While Ericsson floundered under softer AI-related demand and weakening North American contracts, Nokia was booking €1 billion in II and cloud orders in a single quarter. The distance between the two companies, once measured in market share points, was now measured in narrative. One was still selling yesterday's infrastructure. The other was wiring tomorrow's. The invisible empire had become impossible to ignore. The resurrection isn't a miracle. It's a pattern, precise, repeatable, and ruthless. But celebrating the outcome is easy. Dissecting the mechanism is what separates one-time luck from lasting strategy. And what Nokia got right, in sequence, under pressure, with no margin for error, demands a closer look. Nokia's recovery codifies a brutal but effective playbook. 3 rules. No shortcuts, no mercy. Rule 1. Amputate the dying identity to fund the pivot. The $7 billion phone sale was not an admission of failure. It was the harvesting of a pride asset for survival capital, selling the thing the world loved you for, so you could afford to become the thing the world would need next. Rule 2. Acquire a single, mission-critical asset. The Alcatel-Lucent deal was never about synergy. Synergy is what consultants sell when they can't sell clarity. This was a targeted extraction. The prize was Bell Labs and its untouchable dominance in optical networking, the core architecture of the modern internet. A heart transplant, performed on a company the market had already written off. Rule 3. Refocus with monomaniacal discipline. Every resource, every hire, every R&D dollar channeled toward wiring the next secular infrastructure shift. This is why AI and cloud sales surged 49%. This is why network infrastructure growth guidance was raised to a range of 12% to 14%. This is why the stock rallied 140%, and the company was re-rated to a $91.9 billion II infrastructure player, not by miracle, but by mechanism. Nokia became valuable, not by adding more, but by becoming ruthlessly essential. Subtract to survive, acquire to rearm, focus to dominate. This leaves one final, transferable question. In your own portfolio of projects, strategies, and identities, what is the one asset that, if stripped from the wreckage and singularly funded, could become the optical spine of your future?
Learn the next winning strategy.